A Nice Cup of Tea by George Orwell. About the author. Eric Arthur Blair, better known by his pen name George Orwell, was an English novelist, essayist, journalist, and critic whose work is marked by clear prose, awareness of social inequity, opposition to totalitarianism, and candid support of democratic socialism. Now, let's read his essay, A Nice Cup of Tea. If you look up tea in the first cookery book that comes to hand, you will probably find that it is unmentioned, or at most, you will find a few lines of sketchy instructions which give no ruling on several of the most important points. If you look up tea in the first cookery book, recipe book, the book that tells you how to cook. So any cookery book that comes to hand means readily available, easily available. If you look for the word tea in the cookery book, you will probably find that it is unmentioned, or at most you will find a few lines of sketchy instructions. Sketchy means slight, not in detail, superficial, not deep. A few lines of sketchy instructions which give no ruling on several of the most important points. So the cookery book may give you some superficial instructions how to make tea, but it does not give you some of the most important points or some of the rules to be remembered, to be followed when making tea. This is curious, not only because tea is one of the mainstays of civilization in this country, as well as Eire, Australia, and New Zealand, but because the best manner of making it is the subject of violent disputes. This is curious. Curious means strange, bizarre, unusual, uncommon. This is curious, this is strange, because tea is one of the mainstays of civilization in this country. In this country, he means England. Tea is one of the mainstays, a staple food, a main food, or which acts as a pillar of its civilization. The mainstays of civilization in this country, England, as well as in Eire. Eire is the Irish name for Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand. But because the best manner of making it is the subject of violent disputes, the best manner of making it, manner, the way, the method, the best method of making tea is the subject of violent disputes. Disputes, argument. Nobody knows the defined rules for the best way of making tea. So, even though tea is one of the mainstays of civilization, tea is liked throughout the world, a cookery book does not give the important rules of making the best tea. That sounds curious to the author. That is strange. When I look through my own recipe for the perfect cup of tea, I find no fewer than 11 outstanding points. On perhaps 2 of them, there be pretty general agreement, but at least 4 others are acutely controversial. When I look through my own recipe, as the author is not satisfied with the recipe book, the cookery book, which does not give the rules for making the best tea, The author has prepared his own recipe for the perfect cup of tea. And he has found some 11 outstanding points, important points to be followed. Of these, 2 of them would be pretty general agreement. 2 points will be accepted by all. Everyone will agree with him in these 2 points. But at least 4 others are acutely controversial. 4 other points are acutely means strongly, severely, controversial, not easily accepted, arguable, disputable, debatable. Here are my own 11 rules, every one of which I regard as golden. Now the author is going to give his own 11 important points or rules for making the best tea. He considers these rules as golden. First of all, one should use Indian or Ceylonese tea. Here, the author tells us which tea leaves should be chosen. One should use Indian or Ceylonese tea. Ceylon is the old name for Sri Lanka. The author prefers to use Indian or Sri Lankan tea. China tea has virtues which are not to be despised nowadays. China tea has virtue, good quality, appreciable quality, acceptable quality. So China tea has virtues, good qualities, which are not to be despised, disregarded, neglected, ignored. We cannot ignore the good qualities of Chinese tea as well. It is economical and one can drink it without milk. It is economical. Economical means cheap. It's not expensive. It is economical and one can drink it without milk. The tea prepared with Chinese tea leaves can be drunk without milk. But there's not much stimulation in it. But that tea does not give much stimulation. Stimulation, what is stimulation? It cannot activate our nerves. Stimulate means activate. So it cannot produce the desired effect in our body. It cannot activate our nerves. One does not feel wiser, braver, or more optimistic after drinking it. Such tea cannot make us wise or brave or optimistic. I hope you know the word optimistic. Optimistic means hopeful, having the positive attitude. Anyone who has used that comforting phrase, a nice cup of tea, invariably means Indian tea. So the typical phrase, a nice cup of tea, means Indian tea. So the author wants to say that Indian tea is the best of all. Secondly, tea should be made in small quantities. In the first point, he tells us how to choose the tea leaves. He prefers Indian tea. Secondly, tea should be made in small quantities, that is, in a teapot. Tea out of an urn is always tasteless. If you make tea in an urn, the tea would be tasteless. What is an urn? Look at the image. Urn is a vessel like a pot, almost in the shape of a vase. Tea out of an urn is always tasteless, while army tea, made in a cauldron, tastes of grease and whitewash. Tea is made in urn, it becomes tasteless. And if it is made in a cauldron, as it is done in army, what is a cauldron? Cauldron is a pot-like vessel. Look at the image. This is a cauldron. Tea in large quantities are prepared using cauldron. So the tea made in cauldron tastes of grease and whitewash. The teapot should be made of china or earthenware. So now he comes to the point, what kind of vessel can be used for making the best tea? We can't use an urn and we can't use a cauldron either. He says chinaware or earthenware are good. Look at the image. Now you are looking at some chinaware and earthenware. Silver or Britannia-ware teapots produce inferior tea, and enamel pots are worse. So tea produced in Britannia-ware. What is Britannia-ware? See, Britannia is a specific type of alloy, favored for its silvery appearance and smooth surface. And this is an enamel teapot. Silver or Britannia-ware teapots produce inferior tea. So if you use silver or Britannia-ware, the tea will be of lower quality, inferior quality. And enamel pots are worse. If you use enamel pots, that would be worse than that of the Britannia or silver. Though, curiously enough, a pewter teapot is not so bad. Though, strangely, a pewter teapot. What is pewter? Pewter is a malleable alloy composed of 85 to 99% tin, mixed with approximately 5 to 10% antimony, 2% copper, bismuth, and sometimes silver. So pewter is also an alloy. The tea made in a pewter teapot is not so bad. It has acceptable taste. Thirdly, the pot should be warmed beforehand. The teapot should be heated, warmed beforehand, prior to making tea. This is better done by placing it on the hob than by the usual method of swilling it out with hot water. Swilling means pouring. I hope you know the word hob. See, this is a hob. It is a stand-like structure over the burner of a stove. So the teapot itself should be warmed beforehand. Instead of pouring hot water into the teapot, the pot itself should be warmed earlier. Fourthly, the tea should be strong. For a pot holding a quart, if you are going to fill it nearly to the brim, 6 heaped teaspoons would be about right. For a pot holding a quart is a unit of measuring liquids. 1 quart equals 1.14 liters. Some units of measuring liquids are cc or cubic centimeter, gallon, gill, liter, ounce, pint, quart. For a pot holding a quart, a pot with a capacity of a quart, if you're going to fill it nearly to the brim, what is a brim? It is the top edge of the container, of the vessel. Look at the image. So if you're going to fill it nearly to the brim, 6 heaped teaspoons would be about right. So what he wants to say is the proportion between water and tea. For 1 quart of boiled water, you should add 6 heaped teaspoons of tea. That would be the right quantity. In a time of rationing, this is not an idea that can be realized on every day of the week. In a time of rationing, ration is a supply of food, particularly when there is a control over the supply of food, when there is a demand for food. So at the time of rationing, this is not an idea that can be realized on every day. So spending 6 heaped teaspoons of tea every day will not be economical during rationing. But I maintain that 1 strong cup of tea is better than 20 weak ones. But I hope that is the best way of making strong tea. 1 cup of strong tea is better than so many cups of weak tea. All true tea lovers not only like their tea strong, but like it a little stronger with each year that passes, a fact which is recognized in the extra ration issued to old age pensioners. So liking towards stronger tea develops through age. When one gets older and older, he likes his tea stronger and stronger. The more he becomes older, the stronger his tea should be. Fifthly, the tea should be put straight into the pot. No strainers, muslin bags, or other devices to imprison the tea. As the 5th rule, the author says the tea leaves should be directly put into the teapot. We should not use any strainer or muslin bag. What is a strainer? This is the image of a strainer. And now you are looking at muslin bags. Muslin is a type of fine cotton cloth that is almost transparent. No strainers, muslin bags, or other devices to imprison the tea. Imprison means to capture, to filter, to remove. In some countries, teapots are fitted with little dangling baskets under the spout to catch the stray leaves, which are supposed to be harmful. In some countries, people use small baskets like structures, dangling means hanging just below under the spout. What is a spout? This part of the teapot is called a spout. Little dangling basket under the spout to catch the stray leaves. So they hang small baskets below that spout to catch the stray leaves. Stray means free, loose leaves, free leaves, which are supposed to be harmful because they think those loose leaves are harmful. Actually, one can swallow tea leaves in considerable quantities without ill effect. But the author says that they are not harmful. We can swallow a large quantity of such free or loose tea leaves. Actually, one can swallow tea leaves in considerable quantities. Considerable means large. In large quantities without ill effect, without getting any harm. And if the tea is not loose in the pot, it never infuses properly. So there should be some loose leaves, tea leaves in the tea. Otherwise, the tea cannot infuse you properly. Infuse means it cannot produce the desired effect, the stimulating effect. So if we want the tea to be stimulant, we have to leave some loose or free tea leaves in the tea. They should not be filtered or removed. Sixthly, one should take the teapot to the kettle and not the other way about. As the 6th point, he insists that the teapot should be taken to the kettle and we should not take the kettle to the teapot. Do you know what a kettle means? Have you seen a kettle? This is the image of a kettle. The water should be actually boiling at the moment of impact, which means that one should keep it on the flame while one pours. Some people add that one should only use water that has been freshly brought to the boil, but I have never noticed that it makes any difference. Some people consider that the water freshly brought should be used for boiling, but the author feels that makes no difference. Seventhly, after making the tea, one should stir it, or better, give the pot a good shake, afterwards allowing the leaves to settle. So after the tea is made, we should stir it well, and then leave some time for the leaves to settle. Eighthly, one should drink out a good breakfast cup. That is the cylindrical type of cup, not the flat, shallow type. The breakfast cup holds more, and with the other kind, one's tea is always half cold before one has well started on it. So as the eighth point, the author tells us to use a breakfast cup for drinking tea. What is a breakfast cup? Look at the image. We have compared a breakfast cup and a teacup. A breakfast cup is cylindrical, tall, but a teacup is wide and shallow. So if you use a breakfast cup, it can contain more tea. Moreover, it can keep the warmth of the tea for a long time. If we use a teacup, it is wide and shallow, so the tea will get colder very soon. Ninthly, one should pour the cream off the milk before using it for tea. As the ninth point, the author says the milk should be added without any cream in it. So before adding it to tea, we have to remove the cream from the milk. Milk that is too creamy always gives tea a sickly taste. So if we add milk with cream, that creamy milk gives a sickly taste to the tea. Tenthly, one should pour tea into the cup first. This is one of the most controversial points of all. Indeed, in every family in Britain, there are probably two schools of thought on the subject. The milk-first school can bring forward some fairly strong arguments, but I maintain that my own argument is unanswerable. This is that by putting the tea in first and stirring as one pours, one can exactly regulate the amount of milk, whereas one is liable to put in too much milk if one does it the other way around. So as the 10th point, the author says we must first pour the tea into the cup, then slowly add milk. There are so many people who can contradict in this idea. In Britain, there are two groups of people. One group supports the author in adding milk later. The other group says that milk should be poured into the cup first. So there is always argument or debate between these groups. The author humorously calls them two schools of thought. Schools of thought. This phrase is used for people of high ideologies and philosophies. But the author has humorously mentioned there are two schools of thought. According to the author, the tea should be poured into the cup first. Then milk should be added slowly, so that we can regulate the quantity of milk added. If we have the milk in the cup and add tea later, we are liable to put in too much milk. Liable means likely. Chance. There is a chance that we may add excess of milk. We may add more milk than needed. So the author prefers having tea in the cup first, then milk should be added slowly. Lastly, tea, unless one is drinking it in the Russian style, should be drunk without sugar. The author mentions only Russians like to add sugar to tea. Unless you follow the Russian style, you should drink tea without sugar. I know very well that I am in a minority here. I am in a minority means only a few people will support me in this regard. But still, how can you call yourself a true tea lover if you destroy the flavor of your tea by putting sugar in it? If you are a real tea lover, you should love the tea without sugar. It would be equally reasonable to put in pepper or salt. The author humorously says, if you want to add sugar, then why can't you add pepper or salt? All are equal. If you sweeten it, you are no longer tasting the tea. You are merely tasting the sugar. If you add sugar, you will not taste the real tea. You can taste only sugar. You could make a very similar drink by dissolving sugar in plain hot water. So if you like tea with sugar, the same type of drink can be made just by dissolving sugar in hot water. Why should there be tea? According to the author, if sugar is added to tea, it ruins, it destroys the real taste of tea. Some people would answer that they don't like tea in itself, that they only drink it in order to be warmed and stimulated, and they need sugar to take the taste away. Some people say they don't really like the taste of tea, but they have tea only to get the warmth and stimulation that it gives. That's why they add sugar to take away the taste of tea. To those misguided people, I would say, try drinking tea without sugar for, say, a fortnight, and it is very unlikely that you will ever want to ruin your tea by sweetening it again. To those misguided people, the author calls them misguided people. They are wrongly guided. To those misguided people, I would say, try drinking tea without sugar for a fortnight, 14 nights, 2 weeks. You should drink tea for 14 days without sugar, and it is very unlikely, there is no chance, no probability that you will ever want to ruin your tea by sweetening it again. After that, you will not destroy the taste of tea by adding sugar. So if you continuously drink tea without sugar for 14 days, you will start liking tea without sugar. These are not the only controversial points to arise in connection with tea drinking, but they are sufficient to show how subtilized the whole business has become. So the author says there are so many other points which can be added, but he thinks this is enough to show how subtilized the whole tea-making business has become. How subtilized, giving importance to minute details, very keen. There is also the mysterious social etiquette surrounding the teapot. There are some etiquettes followed in taking tea. What is etiquette? Etiquette is manners, social behavior. Mysterious means which is not understood easily, very difficult to understand. There is also the mysterious social etiquette, behavior or manners surrounding the teapot. For example, why is it considered vulgar to drink out of your saucer? For example, pouring your tea into your saucer and drink it out of your saucer is considered vulgar. It is not decent. Such etiquettes are there in drinking tea in public in a social meeting. And much might be written about the subsidiary uses of tea leaves, such as telling fortunes, predicting the arrival of visitors, feeding rabbits, healing burns, and sweeping the carpet. Much might be written. So the author knows so much more about tea leaves. He says something more can be written on the subsidiary uses of tea leaves. Subsidiary means auxiliary or secondary, not the most important. So there are subsidiary uses of tea leaves. Telling fortunes. It is just like foretelling about the future. Predicting the arrival of visitors. Predict, again, guess or foretell whether any visitor is arriving. Feeding rabbits. Tea leaves can be fed to the rabbits. Healing burns. The medicinal value of tea can be used for healing wounds and burns. And sweeping the carpet. To clean the carpet also, tea leaves are used. It is worth paying attention to such details as warming the pot and using water that is really boiling, so as to make quite sure of wringing out of one's ration the 20 good strong cups of that 2 ounces properly handled ought to represent. How to wring out the essence of 2 ounces of tea to make 20 good strong cups of tea during the time of ration. It is by warming the pot and using water that is really boiling. As the author has already said, the water must be boiling already. So beforehand, the pot must be warmed. If you follow this principle, you can make 20 cups of strong tea out of just 2 ounces during ration. The author has clearly given us directions and instructions to make the best tea. And thus, finally, we get a nice cup of tea.